You are standing in your kitchen. Everyone else is asleep. You are utterly exhausted, but your brain won't stop calculating the bills, tomorrow's schedule, and the things you forgot to do. You are holding the entire house together, and you feel like if you stop for even 1 second, the sky will fall. Welcome to the Atlas Trap. Welcome to the debate.
Yeah, it is an incredibly dark place to start, but honestly, it's an absolutely necessary one.
It really is. I mean, it is the defining silent crisis of our time. Today, we are dissecting a profound sociological concept, the Atlas Trap, and, the crushing invisible mental load of adulthood.
Right, and we are looking at a central question that is quite heavy, but it demands an answer.
Exactly. Is the crushing weight of family and adult responsibility an external sentence, something forced upon us by the unrelenting demands of modern society? Or is our silent suffering, in fact, a self-imposed, willing isolation?
It is essentially the difference between being a prisoner and, well, being your own jailer.
Right. And my position on this is clear. Modern life and our current societal structure effectively play the role of Zeus in the ancient Greek myth. Society forces breadwinners and caregivers into the role of the Titan Atlas, demanding they carry the unbearable, invisible load of survival. The condemnation is external, it is objective, and it's inescapable.
And I come at it from a different way. My position is that the true tragedy lies in our complicity.
Complicity?
Yeah. We willingly isolate ourselves in silence. We equate our endurance of this pain with providing love. And in doing so, we are ultimately sacrificing our own sanity just to maintain an illusion of control.
Okay. Let's lay out the framework of this trap. The concept draws a direct parallel to mythology, where the Titan Atlas was condemned to hold up the heavens upon his shoulders for eternity.
For eternity, yeah.
He could never rest, he could never set the burden down, and crucially, he could never complain. Sociologists use this as a chilling metaphor for the modern mental load of adulthood. And I really want to emphasize the word invisible here.
Because it's not physical.
Exactly. We aren't just talking about physical labor. We are talking about endless cognitive labor. Planning, anticipating needs, balancing the budget, and managing the emotional well-being of the entire household.
It's an exhausting list just to hear.
Right? Modern society has engineered an environment where economic realities, the lack of communal support, and the expectation of a perfect, frictionless household demand that you carry the weight of your family's survival seamlessly.
While I agree entirely that the weight is real, I really do. The cognitive labor you just described, the financial anxiety, the emotional management, that is an objective reality of modern adulthood.
Glad we agree on that part.
But I argue that the defining characteristic of the modern Atlas isn't the physical or even the cognitive work itself. It's the silence.
The silence.
Yes, we silently carry this weight. We hide our burnout. That silence is not an external mandate. It's a self-imposed martyrdom. We've internalized this toxic metric where we conflate silently enduring pain with being a loving partner or a good parent.
So you're saying it's our fault?
I'm saying we push ourselves, hiding the reality of our exhaustion from the very people we are supposedly supporting until our psychological spines snap under the pressure. The cage isn't the electric bill. The cage is our refusal to admit that we are breaking.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. To truly unpack this, we need to look at the source of the condemnation. Let's trace the architecture of this burden.
Okay, let's look at the architecture.
You suggest the silence is self-imposed, but let's look at the structural reality of the world we live in. Let's think about the sheer volume of tasks required just for a family's basic survival today.
It's a lot, sure.
It is. I want to talk about why this cognitive labor is so fundamentally exhausting. In cognitive science, there is something called the Zeigarnik effect. It's the principle that our brains remember uncompleted or interrupted tasks better than completed ones.
Oh, right, the open loops.
Exactly. The open loops. The invisible mental load is essentially running 100 open loops in your brain's background operating system. You're trying to remember to buy milk, schedule a parent-teacher conference, anticipate your partner's stress after a long workday, and pay the insurance premium all while doing your actual job.
Which is a full-time job in itself.
Precisely. The brain cannot close these loops, so it is constantly firing, constantly burning energy. It is mathematically impossible to complete the cognitive labor of modern life within a standard waking day.
But everybody does it.
Do they? Society has dismantled the village that used to raise children and support families. They've replaced it with these hyper-individualized, isolated nuclear units. If you drop the ball, you lose your home. If you fail to manage the friction, your children's emotional well-being shatters.
That sounds a bit extreme, don't you think?
Not at all. The isolation is an architectural feature of modern life, not a psychological quirk of the individual, meaning the system is literally built on the assumption that you will do this unpaid, invisible labor in the dark, so the economy can keep running in the light.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why.
Go ahead.
You are granting society far too much power over our internal emotional landscape. Yes, the tasks are real. The open loops are real. The mortgage must be paid. But the requirement to hide the struggle, that is deeply internalized.
But society expects you to handle it.
You mentioned that society dismantled the village. But I argue we locked the door to whatever village is left because we are fundamentally ashamed of needing it. Why do we carry it silently? Because we have bought into a romanticized vision of adulthood where needing help is synonymous with failing.
I don't know if I agree that it's romanticized.
It is, though. The tragedy isn't doing the laundry and the bills at midnight. The tragedy is sitting at the kitchen table doing those bills at midnight while your partner is asleep upstairs and choosing not to wake them up because you believe it is your noble duty to protect them from the stress.
Wow.
Yeah, we are actively choosing to suffer alone to preserve an image of our own invulnerability.
Wait, let me make sure I understand what you're suggesting here. Are you saying that society isn't forcing me to do that laundry or stress over those bills at midnight, but my own ego is?
I'm saying the silent suffering is ego-driven, yes.
Because honestly, as someone who has been in that exact kitchen scenario, that feels a bit insulting. How do you square the idea of internalized martyrdom with the actual economic and social realities we face?
Well,
wait, let me finish. If society structurally penalizes caregivers who break down, isn't the silence you're talking about just a required survival mechanism rather than a willing isolation?
it feels insulting because it forces us to look at our own complicity in our exhaustion. But let's look at those societal penalties you mentioned.
Let's do that. Think about what happens in the real world when a modern adult actually complains or admits they are failing. Professional environments do not reward breadwinners who admit they are too overwhelmed by domestic cognitive labor to function.
True, but
If you go to your boss and say, "I am paralyzed by the mental load of organizing my family's life," you are sidelined. Social circles often stigmatize parents who openly admit they cannot manage the emotional well-being of their household.
people do judge, yes.
Exactly. The original mythology points out that Atlas could never complain. That wasn't because he had a martyr complex. It was the condition of his punishment. We hide the burnout because the moment we reveal it, we are deemed incompetent.
That's a very bleak view of our support systems.
It's the reality. Society requires the illusion of the frictionless family machine, and it punishes the cogs that squeak. Therefore, the silence is just another layer of the external burden. It's an invisible gag placed over the invisible load.
That is a compelling argument. But have you considered that by framing it entirely as a survival mechanism, you strip the individual of all agency?
I wouldn't say all agency.
You kind of do. You turn the modern adult into a completely passive victim of societal forces. Let's look closely at how we project ourselves to the world. The defining image of this trap is that we, as modern caregivers and breadwinners, smile through the exhaustion.
Yes, the performative aspect.
Right. Now I want to zero in on that smile. Is society really standing in your kitchen at 2 a.m. demanding that you smile while you calculate the bills?
Well, no. Not literally no.
No. That performative happiness is the heaviest part of the invisible load, but it is one we manufacture. We smile because we have tied our entire identity and self-worth to being the unbreakable pillar.
I mean, we want to be strong for our families.
Exactly. We want our families to look at us and see a savior. We don't just fear punishment from society, we fear the loss of our identity as the indispensable one. If we complain, if we ask for help, we are no longer the hero holding up the heavens.
You're calling it an addiction?
We are addicted to the martyrdom. We choose not to complain because being the sole reason everything hasn't collapsed gives us a profound, albeit highly toxic sense of control and purpose.
I think that interpretation shifts a massive amount of blame onto the victim of the burnout. When we talk about smiling through the exhaustion, we are describing the emotional labor required to maintain a stable household. The smile is a tool of the trade.
A tool that's destroying us.
But if you project terror, exhaustion, and despair constantly, you directly damage the emotional well-being of your children and your partner. You destabilize the very thing you are tasked with protecting.
You don't have to project despair, but you could just be honest.
The smile is performative, yes, but it is a performance demanded by the role. It is the aesthetic requirement of the trap. You aren't just required to do the impossible. You are required to make it look effortless. That isn't an addiction to martyrdom. That is fulfilling the brutal terms and conditions of modern adulthood.
Okay, but let's talk about the mechanics of what that performance actually does to a human being. We talk about psychological spines snapping under the pressure. Why does a spine snap?
From the sheer weight?
No, it's not just from the physical execution of tasks. It is from the cognitive dissonance.
Explain what you mean by that in this context.
Cognitive dissonance is the mental discomfort experienced by someone holding two contradictory beliefs, or in this case, a massive gap between your internal reality and your external projection.
Ah, I see.
Internally, you are drowning in open loops. Your nervous system is flooded with stress. But externally, you are projecting calm, capable, smiling control. Maintaining that gap requires an immense amount of physiological energy. It spikes your cortisol.
It really does take a physical toll.
It keeps your sympathetic nervous system locked in a state of fight or flight constantly. We are literally having a silent panic attack about whether to schedule the pediatric dentist on a Tuesday or a Thursday and acting like everything is completely fine. It is absurd when you say it out loud, but we all do it.
It is absurd, but it's also incredibly common.
Right. And what happens to the household when that person fundamentally breaks? When the nervous system burns out and the psychological spine snaps, the fallout is catastrophic for the very people they were trying to protect.
The fallout is huge.
This is why I insist the true danger is our own complicity. We convince ourselves that hiding our pain is a form of love. We tell ourselves, I will absorb this stress so my family doesn't have to, but you cannot absorb infinite stress.
No, you can't.
By refusing to distribute the weight, by insisting on maintaining this heroic, smiling facade, we are guaranteeing our eventual destruction. We are walking ourselves to the edge of the cliff and calling it a scenic route.
That's a haunting image, and the research surrounding this phenomenon points out that this destination is almost inevitable under the current parameters. It presents this snapping of the spine as a terminal trajectory. We are destroyed under the pressure of trying to keep the sky from falling.
Yep.
And this brings us to the climax of this entire debate, and perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the concept. When sociologists analyze this, they often put the word sky in quotation marks.
Yes. And those quotation marks change absolutely everything.
They really do, because it implies that what we perceive as total annihilation if we fail might actually be an illusion. We are so consumed by the endless cognitive labor of predicting disaster, so focused on preventing the sky from falling, that we manufacture our own psychological snapping point.
We create the crisis.
But because the pressure feels so absolute, we cannot test the hypothesis. We are trapped in a state of permanent tension. I think of it this way. We are like a muscle that has been clenched for so long, we have completely forgotten how to release it without tearing the tissue. The cognitive load has rewired our nervous systems to believe that rest equals death.
That analogy of the clenched muscle perfectly captures the internal mechanism of the trap. And it brings us to a chilling counter-framework. If the word sky is in quotes, it means the catastrophe we are preventing is, at least in part, a phantom weight.
Define a phantom weight for me. How would someone listening to this identify a phantom weight in their own kitchen tonight?
A phantom weight is the deeply held belief that if you don't execute a task perfectly, the resulting failure will be catastrophic to your family's survival or happiness.
Like what?
It's the belief that if you don't perfectly curate the family holiday, your children's childhood is ruined. It's the belief that if the house is messy when guests arrive, your social standing is permanently destroyed.
I see. What if the sky wouldn't actually fall if we let go? What if the family's survival doesn't actually require this much psychological destruction? What if the house would still stand if the scheduling wasn't perfect, if the bills were paid a day late, if the emotional atmosphere of the household was allowed to be messy and human instead of seamlessly managed? So you are suggesting that the invisible mental load is largely composed of these phantom weights, things we've inflated in our own minds.
I am suggesting that we are terrified to find out. We are too terrified to try putting the burden down. It goes right back to identity and control. If you let go and the sky doesn't fall, well, then what was all that suffering for?
Oh, wow.
Right? Why did you snap your psychological spine? Facing the reality that your martyrdom was unnecessary might actually be more painful than the burnout itself. So we keep holding our arms up, we keep obsessing over the invisible tasks, we perpetuate the crisis to justify our own exhaustion.
That is a dark thought.
We become addicted to our own suffering because it proves our indispensability. The Atlas trap isn't just that you are holding up the weight, it's that you would fight anyone who tried to take it from you because you are terrified of who you are without it.
That's a fascinating perspective, though. I would definitely frame it differently. Even if some of the weight is a phantom, the consequences of the trap are objectively real. Whether the sky is literal or metaphorical, the psychological spine is still snapping. And I maintain that the fear of letting go is not just an ego-driven desire to be indispensable. It is a highly rational response to an unforgiving society.
Rational how?
Because the stakes are incredibly high for most families. The margin for error in modern life is razor thin. When we talk about the cognitive labor of survival, we aren't just talking about curating a perfect holiday.
Sure, there are real consequences.
If a breadwinner drops the ball in planning and scheduling, the financial repercussions can be devastating. A missed payment can tank a credit score, which impacts housing. If a caregiver stops managing the emotional friction in a household, marriages fracture.
But is it all on one person?
Often, yes. The fear of putting the burden down isn't just an addiction to suffering, it is a hypervigilant survival strategy in a world that offers virtually no safety net. The quotation marks around sky might indicate that it's a perceived reality, but to the person standing under it, the crushing weight is indistinguishable from solid rock.
I don't deny that the weight is felt as solid rock. It absolutely is. But we must look at the mechanics of how a human being actually breaks. You don't break purely from the physical execution of tasks. You break from the profound loneliness of the invisible mental load.
The loneliness.
Yes. It is carried solely in the mind. The tragedy is that we refuse to make it visible. By refusing to speak of it, by ensuring it remains an invisible, silent burden, we deny our partners, our families, and our communities the opportunity to share it.
That assumes they would share it if we asked.
We condemn ourselves to this role, and we use the very real pressures of modern society as our excuse to remain isolated. We say society forced us into this, but in truth, we are the ones turning the key in the lock every single morning.
We have really reached a point of profound, dark complexity in this discussion. To summarize my position, I maintain that the modern world is relentless. It constructs an inescapable, crushing mental load through the sheer volume of cognitive labor required to navigate modern adulthood.
Right.
The Atlas trap is an external reality, a societal architecture that demands perfection, punishes vulnerability, and forces breadwinners and caregivers to carry the survival of their families in silent exhaustion.
And I maintain that while the societal pressures are incredibly real, our addiction to silent suffering and our fear of relinquishing control form the true cage. We are complicit in our own destruction because we equate enduring pain with love, and we're fundamentally terrified to discover that our martyrdom might be unnecessary.
Yet, despite our disagreement on the root source of this condemnation, we converge on one deeply unsettling point. Whether imposed by society or sustained by self-isolation, the psychological spines of modern adults are snapping under the weight.
They really are.
The exhaustion is real. The burnout is real. The invisible load is crushing a generation of people who are desperately trying to maintain an illusion of control. And the saddest part is that they are doing it in the very place they should feel most supported, their own homes.
Understanding this invisible mental load requires confronting our own reality, our own complicity, and the structures we live within. There is no simple resolution here, and no clear winner between our perspectives. There is only the invitation to stare into the reality of your own life and the burdens you carry.
Because the trap is always waiting.
Tomorrow morning, when you wake up and put the weight of the world back on your shoulders, ask yourself, are you holding up the sky, or are you just too afraid to put it down?